Okay. March 1st, 2023, Road Advisory Committee. Call a meeting to order at 6:34.
My computer
Is that
says
about right?
30. My computer says 31.
6:30. Oh, that's off. 6:31. Okay. Roll call.
Kerry.
Present.
Hubert. Shields.
Present.
Walsh, present. Groden. Human.
Present.
Don't see Mr. Nichols. Smith. Townsend, present.
Don is absent tonight. Adoption of the agenda. Is there any additions or questions or comments? Okay.
I'll move the agenda.
Well, I just wanted, before we do, I want to say that I apologize for the 225 pages. It's not everything to read through. It was how things printed out. I had many issues with the internet and power, so it won't be the size of a telephone book the next time. Well, please hope not.
No promises.
Okay, so,
I'll still move the agenda.
okay.
I'll second.
Let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Nays?
Public comments? Anybody in person? It's 33.
Hi, good evening, Kathleen Brandt. I just wanted to let Mr. Shields know, the last letter on my name is with a T. So I figured that was just, that's probably how you,
Correction to the minutes for this meeting.
okay, you probably heard it as a D, so.
Yeah, exactly right.
I want to thank Mr. Human for the article that you provided. It was very insightful. I appreciate the focus on safety. It was something I never thought about, that wider roads are not safer roads. There's just too much more room to screw up. I sent a letter to this committee. I was hoping it would make the packet, but I guess I sent it too late. Did you folks get a chance to read that? I'm going to do a recap of it.
When did you send it? You have a date?
It was Monday, so I'm sure I missed the deadline.
Okay, oh, we'll look for it, but go ahead and.
Okay, so this is all related to content that's in the packet. So I'm calling out that the Washtenaw County Road Commission has submitted their spring 2023 report for Scio Township. And this report details all of our paved roads, unpaved roads, road condition based on their PACER system, which is a rating system that they monitor, maintain, the cost to repair, replace by road condition, and the 10-year average annual expenditures needed for Scio roads. And I call out that this seems to be a well-founded determination of cost. It has some science behind it, facts. And then I mentioned that during your last meeting, you present a proposal about funding sources or funding needs. And I asked specifically the question of how did you come up with the figure of $185 per parcel? And there's no documentation on how that was derived. That presentation is in the packet again. Again, there's no documentation on how that was derived. So I asked that question and the feedback, the answer I got back was this figure was derived as a back of the envelope calculation. So, and then I call out the difference between what the road commission has annual needs of $767,000 per year, 10 years. And that's based on road condition, what kind of road is it, paved, unpaved, and costs for each of those repairs. Now, on the other hand, what's in the packet as a proposal at $185 a year, that equals $1,154,000 roughly. So I took the 185 parcel, $185 per parcel, times the number of parcels that our assessor has on her reports. And I asked the question, how can your back of the envelope figure be 50% higher than what the road commission is suggesting? So if you guys could address that, I'm not comfortable with just a number that's said, it used to be 85. I don't know how that was derived, but seemed to work. I'm not comfortable with a back of the envelope number. So if you could enlighten me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Paula, did you have a public?
No, I'm
comment?
here to just listen,
Listen, okay.
and then maybe at the end, be a public
Yes.
comment again.
Ian, anybody online?
Yeah, we have nobody with their hands up right now that I can see, unless I'm missing something.
Anybody online, or would you
Got
like to
one
speak?
hand up.
Okay,
David Reed, okay. David, you want to go ahead?
Yes, David Reed, Scio Township. Kathleen, I can answer your question how the $85 was arrived at. It was arrived at because we had 29 projects. We figured out how many feet or partial miles they were, what it cost to use the gravel lift at the time. And we figured out it was going to be, I think, $3.1 or $3.2 million. And then we figured out, and at the time we didn't realize this was illegal. We figured out that we'd also be doing maintenance on those roads after 3 or 5 years. So we factored that in, and we came up with approximately $5 million divided by 6,200, which is what the number of parcels we had then. And that's how we came up with the $85. And because 188, you have to be very specific with 188. You have to list the projects that you're going to do. You have to list the costs that they're going to be, and you also have to list the time that they're going to be done. At least that's what we thought. Actually, turns out 188 is actually for a post-project funding, not a pre-project funding, because I think it says very clearly in 188 that the project has to be completed before the board can take on, or before the board can go forward with a 188. What we did in 2013 violated several parts of 188. But the answer to your question, Kathleen, we figured out how much money we needed based on the work we were going to do and divided it by the number of parcels and came up with $85. At the time, we thought that since if this worked really well, we'd be able to continue and renew that with only maybe $60 or $65 per parcel, because we'd only need to do maintenance on those 29 parcels. We never envisioned that this would be a township-wide pave or fix every road in the township, which of course you can't do because Act 188 is for a special benefit for the people who are assessed, not a benefit for the general public or for the entire township. So, but Kathleen, that's where the $85 came from. Thank you.
anybody else?
I don't see any other hands raised at the moment.
Okay, thank you for the public comments. Next item on the agenda. Oh, yeah, a lot of this packet, it's correspondences as well. We had quite a few the last time. Do we
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Point of order. Do we need to have a motion to close public comment?
We haven't done that.
Okay.
We're not that formal. I mean, we're
Gotcha.
formal, but. Okay, so, discussion? Discussion items? Go ahead.
There's an email from today that looked like it went to the entire roads committee. It says 2023 Township Local Road Program.
Mhm.
And the Washington County Road Commission was asking.
Could you speak a little louder? Sorry to say that I can't hear very well anymore.
We had a new piece of correspondence that came in today from the supervisor. Sort of, it was a forward of a Washington County Road Commission email looking at the draft agreement. We don't have the draft agreement review on our agenda.
No, because
Tonight.
we didn't know about, and there's, from what Adam Lapp had said, that there's, it's not as expensive as what we thought it was going to be, so there's some changes. So that's gonna be part of it. That will be our number one item on the next agenda, meeting.
Great, it says they have a deadline of May
Yes,
19. I
right.
just wanted to bring that to our attention.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks.
Ken, on that, I mean, we, at our last meeting, those were the projects we approved.
Yeah, and whatever, because it came in today, so I didn't get a chance to go through what he
We
was
can look at
saying.
it, I'm just saying, they are, they're, so, I think what he was saying is, they gave us rough numbers, let's say $80,000, and now the project came in at $76,000. So if you compare the list that we approved on 8 and the list that he's given us, that's what's a little bit, that's why their number's a little bit less. Because when they were giving me the number back in January, February, they said this may be a little bit high, and they refined their number. And sometimes, you know, when they gave me 76, I probably just rounded it up to 80 anyways. Because I look at, we're approving an overall budget for that project, and so that's where they've refined it. So I'm not sure if we really, we sort of pushed that up to the board, so I'm not sure. Didn't we? Yeah, because I thought we
Well,
passed.
we did, but it hasn't come in front of us. So if this is, that's part of the budget, right? This is what you're talking about.
Right. 'Cause
And it's on this list or this,
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, the yellow.
okay. Yeah, so
Actually, the blue.
the blue. And then again, there's discussion about the overage money from the SAD from 2013. So that's where we're kind of in the middle of that. There's other things that had come up yesterday. Last night we had a board meeting. I'm sorry, I did not have time to do a report. But about the fire funds, or not the fire funds, but the fire potential SAD that's coming up that they're planning for. So that's what most of the discussion was last night. And then there's some other items, but so we will have a budget meeting, a special meeting on March 21st. We're going to discuss some of it in the March 14th meeting, and then we have to have everything approved by March 28th. So if we put this on our agenda to kind of review and again, for our own, and by then, hopefully we'll have some more information regarding the 2013 money. Kind of in limbo a little bit and rated. Of course, it's a really poor time of year because we have to, approve our budget. Okay. So I'll include everything that Adam had sent over. When I received the email, it did not have the attachment, so then it came in a little bit later. Jeff, you had responded to the MLive article, and would you like to talk about the Strong Towns and just a little bit? So,
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, Strong Towns is I guess a website, but it's kind of developed into a bit of a movement, really concerned about car dependency and also just safety in general for pedestrians and motorists. One of the things that they've been pretty vocal about is speaking out against current road engineering standards across the US, particularly ones that make our roads very wide, build them sort of all roads, regardless of their purpose, to highway standards. So with the idea of maximizing flow for the driver and minimizing obstructions or things that would make people slow down, I guess. The argument from Strong Towns is that this is not safe at all and that our roads are far too wide. Trying to fix it with things like speed limits is not how you address it, right? The road should match the road size, and the way that it feels to drive on it should be should match the speed limit that you're trying to go for. So I give an example of Parkland Plaza. I don't know if y'all have driven on that, but it's an incredibly wide road. The speed limit is 25, but it's built like 35 is very easy to go on there. So the road's a bit oversized for 25-mile-an-hour traffic. So there was another component to this discussion, though, because I think the MLive article was talking about trying to address why have traffic deaths increased since the pandemic. And the official narrative from, I guess, I don't know who's officially giving the narrative, but the general consensus for the official narrative is that drivers are taking more risks because of the pandemic somehow, and that these reckless drivers are to blame for this increase in traffic deaths. Strongtown argues that those reckless drivers have always been there, and you're not going to solve it by just creating this boogeyman of reckless drivers and saying, this is the cause, this drunk driver is the cause of these issues, this driver texting and driving fast. Those people are always going to be there, and it's the only way to minimize the amount of damage that those drivers can do is to make our roads safer, which is to make it uncomfortable to drive recklessly.
That's no fun. That's an interesting thought.
How do they do it in Europe? Because the Autobahn has a lot less accidents than we do, and their speed limit's a lot higher.
Well, the Autobahn is an appropriate place for speed, but Parkland Plaza is not an appropriate place for speed. There's a concept called a strode in this movement in the Strong Towns realm. It's a portmanteau of streets and roads. The idea that roads are for basically what we would call a highway, I would say. Roads are for moving traffic very fast. Streets are for local traffic, right? You just got to move a short distance, or you're going to park your car. You're going from point A to point B, not trying to get somewhere in a hurry, right? And they say that a lot of roads or streets in America fall into this category called a strode. Jackson Plaza might be considered one, where you have a road that's built like it's a highway, but it has lots of entry and exit points, right? A lot of curb cuts, lots of intersections. And that when you build a highway with all these intersections and curb cuts, you are decreasing the efficiency of the road and increasing chances for accidents, because now you have this high speed road that has all of these intersections, dangerous points. And so the Autobahn would be an appropriate use of a road, right? It's built for high speed, it's limited access, the same way our interstates work. But a lot of our big highways that you'll find four or more lanes on in America, especially, are built the size of highways for road purposes. And it's not a good combination of either one of those.
Well, I read an article, what they said, I don't know if it was your article or somewhere else. They said what Europe does when they have accidents in an area, they send engineers out and engineer the road. What we do is we send out more policemen to police the road for a period of time. We don't engineer it or re-engineer.
You know that we're short
Makes sense.
police.
What do you say, Mr. Traffic Engineer?
Yeah, well, interesting topic. I would say that the driver education standards in Europe are way higher. So from the get-go, you don't let people drive unless they've gone through a lot of proficiency. We have, certainly me growing up where I grew up, we have very narrow roads. with trees very close to the roads. I can really like attest to this. Like I know if I go to my parents' house, I drive on some crazy roads, but we also have a lot of speed. In some cases, like I think about like Huron River Drive, it's a classic road. That could be a 60-mile-an-hour road in the environment I grew up in. But we also have very different cars, very different tires. So I don't know that there's a definitive answer. I'm listening with interest, and I don't know I have a solution. There are definitely different rules for the roads as well. I know driving on an Autobahn, it's just a different mindset in terms of how people drive. You know, they're driving in the fast lane, they see somebody coming a mile behind them, they move over. And they don't undertake, they're not allowed to in Europe. And I'm not expressing any opinion one way or the other. It's something that I think about a lot and laugh at because I don't know that I have an answer. So Jackson Road is, you're right. It's a big road, carries a lot of traffic. We don't have population density here that we have in Europe. So you look at that as well. There's just, I know growing up in the UK, there's just a lot of people and not a lot of room. And so you spend a lot of your life in traffic jams, getting from A to B, and it's really frustrating. Don't have that here. So, +1 for the US. I agree with the comment about engineering. Things get looked at. The roads that are intended to be driven fast, they're really engineered for extreme speeds. And we have a lot more roundabouts, and we tend to get traffic away from the highways for the local kind of maneuvering. My observations without any comment one way or the other, which is better.
Jillian? Yeah, obviously I've been doing this for about 40 years. And yeah, what has happened is it's called ADJOURNMENT, American Standard, state highway officials. And it's they've been super conservative. So they make everything oversized. And when you get federal funds, everything has to be approved by the federal government and MDOT and all the state agencies. And there's really very limited flexibility. So then on top of that is liability. So engineers become, if I do anything less than it's in this called this green book, if you do anything less than the ADJOURNMENT standard, feel like you're gonna get sued. So everyone's cautious. So it's like, yeah, let's make all our lanes 12 foot wide. Do we need 12-foot lanes? No. 10, 11 foot would be fine, but the standard is 12. So everyone feels, we have done some 11-foot lanes. And it always interests me, Ypsilanti. If you go into Ypsilanti, you got Huron and Hamilton, right? 3 lanes going in, 3 lanes going out. More lanes than an I-94 South Van Arbor. So about 5 years ago, I was working with the city. We wanted to do a road diet, which take out one of those lanes and put it in a bike lane. MDOT has to do this whole study, and they're like, well, it's still not enough information, So like, oh my God, have you been to Ypsilanti? I don't know exactly when it needed 3 lanes in and 3 lanes out of Ypsilanti, but it's sort of like, I-94 has 2 lanes in each direction, works just fine. Here in Hamilton, there might have been a period of 5 or 10 minutes when there was a backup on those roads, but sort of like, we've done that, like over-design these roads. Then you get 3 lanes going in, 3 lanes coming out. If you're a pedestrian, good luck trying to cross that. You're just like taking your risk. And then on top of that, in Michigan, other states, if you stop off the curb, you have to yield pedestrians. In Michigan, that's not really the law. The drivers, we've turned it so vehicles have all the rights. Pedestrians are sort of like, look out, Ann Arbor has tried to make those changes where when you're approaching and step off, you have to stop for them, which adds confusion because the people from the rest of the area are sort of like, why is that guy stopping? Because someone's in the crosswalk. Well, in Ann Arbor, you're required to, that's their law. And the rest of the state isn't. So that, Ann Arbor, we've tried to make it, they've tried to make it more pedestrian friendly, but it should be a statewide thing. And and as people, it's trying to go back to sustainability, to get more people out of their vehicles and make it safer so you could walk and ride and get around to your school, work. Some people, I do projects, it's like, some people, that's how they get to school. That's how they get to work. Not everyone has a car. And there's the expectation, everyone in this world has a car. Well, not everyone does have a car. So you need to provide other modes of transportation for people to get safely there. So it's always, it's just interesting because, you know, people get this, you know, and on Parkland Plaza, you know, we did that sidewalk and I said, you know, what we need to do is add bike lanes to help reduce that. And there was some pushback, so they put those things called sharrows, which most people have no idea what a sharrow is, which means you're supposed to share it. A road, a car, and a bike's supposed to share it. You know, if you look around here, how many people know what a sharrow is? I mean, the traffic engineers do, maybe some of them do. But if you put a bike lane in here and stripe it, what you're trying to do is reduce the width, so it feels a little bit tighter. So then when it feels tighter, people are gonna drive slower. But like you said, a road looks wide, you feel like, oh, there's nothing here. And if you're a pedestrian, you gotta walk all the way across those super wide roads. If you're in a wheelchair and those type of things. So, you know, I think as, you know, a nation, as a community, we need to do a better job. And I think you're right on the point. And like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. It's sort of like, it's just, you know, traffic engineers and people, it's like, we need to get as many cars through this location as possible in this period of time. It's always about these peak hours in the morning, peak hours in the evening. In Ann Arbor, you know, I lived out in California where there's like real traffic. And Ann Arbor really doesn't have in rush hour. Okay, on I-94 at State Street, it backs up for a period of time. But I mean, the rest of the city, I mean, those are like, you know, what are we trying to do? So it's interesting, sort of like, I think we're finally, you know, at least the city and other communities trying to figure out a better way to make it safer so people can walk to school, walk to the grocery store. I mean, a lot of our developments, we need to have ways for people, sidewalks don't even go to these communities. Like you have to drive everywhere in, you know, in Michigan or Southeast Michigan or a lot of the country. I mean, they don't even have like sidewalk. Why would you ever walk to, and when you're in Europe and England, that's what a lot of those people do. That's how you get around it.
Everywhere.
I know.
Get your groceries, get your shopping, it's all on bicycle.
I know. It's just sort of, you know, the whole vehicle thing, you know, Henry Ford, you know, maybe he was a great person, but at the end of the day, we've all bought into the whole vehicle, you know, got rid of interurbans, got rid of all that stuff, and like vehicle, got rid of bus services, like vehicles, everyone's car driven, and you know, MDOT same way. If you're not in a car or a truck, they really don't care about, you know, providing pedestrian access to their, they say they have complete streets. Really, project is what they call a complete street, means all modes of transportation, not just people driving a car, driving a truck. Which you can show them, because, you know, I'm passionate about it. It's like we can do a better job. Like it's that, these things you can do it here locally. I think can help sustainability. Infrastructure, how to make infrastructure, South Township more pedestrian, cyclist friendly, so people feel comfortable getting from here to there.
Well, and we need, you know, in a city, you're walking to get your groceries or you're walking to get whatever to the pharmacy or whatnot. And here we just have Jackson Road that has our commercial, and then we're kind of limited. I know when I go to Ann Arbor, right on the other side of the border to do my grocery shopping. So that's, you know, to walk, I mean, even to walk to Meyer for somebody that's on Joy Road, that's not reasonable. But yeah, we should have, of course, a balance, but it just, you know, within a city, then it's really like, especially New York City, but then Ann Arbor's more condensed, you know, to have a car is expensive. And yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Unless you absolutely have to get out for some reason. But yeah, we do need to be looking at buses and sidewalks and all those different things. Yeah. Thank you for the response to the article. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. The whole thing's interesting. The next on the discussion only, this is has to do with, you know, Roy, I guess this is your sheet. I wasn't sure where you got this or if you just inherited it and then you were going on, because a lot of this is from previous road committee. It was called the local roads at one time. So looking at, so I went to, as I said, and I have all of this if you want me to forward it to you. I did go to the township, and as I said, Sandy only had the 400 funds without the breakdown of, I just wanted to see where all the money went to each project, because we have this list and we have to, you know, account for the money that we spent on these projects. So we do have some guesstimates or rounded up or whatever you want to call them. I don't know what you call them, Roy. But then I actually had to go to the road commission to get the final billing. So they give us a final billing. Well, they give us a bill 3 times a year. And I think one in July, bless you, once in December, and then again at the end of the year, but the one at the end, or fiscal year, which would be March 30, around the end of March. But in December is when they usually give us, that bill is the same pretty much as the end of the fiscal year because there's no construction during the winter season. So went through and matched the what was done and what we spent. Now, so then we added up all the, from every year up to 2022, because that was the final bill. So then I went to Jessica and asked her for a printout of, because I was like, well, how much money did we collect and how much is left over? So then she gave me, I don't even know what this is called, but I was looking at it and, where'd it go?
These things, these general ledger.
No, it was before that. This is, and I brought it with me and I made some, I wrote down how much it was that we collected and subtracted, but then I noticed that there was the money or the expenses were not adding up to what we had added up here. So then she printed off another sheet and there's different expenses. So that's where this is the itemized, and it still doesn't get into real, I mean, it's not a lot of detail. So you can see where we paid the Washtenaw County Road Commission. Let's see, on January 7, 2015, we paid $84,511. But then there's other items on here like KBK landscaping for $9,500. Now, I don't know what that is. Because we don't know what's entailed in these projects and who was part of the different contractors and whatnot. From what I understood, and this was back with a different committee, but from what I understood is that the road commission, we give them a project to do and then they do the engineering, they bring in the subcontractors and all of that, and then they give us a bill for it. So, but I do know at one point that the local roads committee was hiring their own contractors and engineers, but I'm not really sure yet. So I wanted everybody to have this so you can go through, double check, and we can try to figure something out. And this isn't about just going in the past. This is helping us for what we're going to do, whatever funding source, because we have to be very clear with what we spend and on what projects.
Yeah, it's interesting, some of the stuff called Beckett Raiders Engineering Company, so it's interesting, they're like billing annually buildings, so it's like, wonder what.
Have you ever heard of them?
Yeah, they're a local architect and engineering firm, so it'd be interesting what they were.
I think they were
Contracted to do.
pre-Washtenaw Engineering. I
Yeah,
think
Washtenaw.
before Joe Maynard took this over, is Washtenaw Engineering for sort of the project management side of so many of the SADs. I think it was Beckett Raiders.
Well, there's the neighborhood SADs that there's Washtenaw Engineering, OHM. But I didn't realize that because all of our projects, we have a budget and we decide what we're going to do and give it to the road commission, right? Isn't that how it's always
Well,
been,
the road
or no?
commission usually would come in with a list of projects. And then the township would say, yeah, we want to do, let's say they come in a list with 10 projects. Then the township would say, we want to do these 6 projects or these 5 projects. And the road commission would go do that.
So that's on top of their list. So they come to us with the list
Yeah.
too? Okay, and then we have a list.
Well, generally, the list would just come from the road commission.
Except where there's this neighborhood.
Yeah, neighborhood SAD, yeah, I mean, but neighborhood SAD should not be.
No, they
it's
should,
just-
no,
There
there's,
should be in, yeah, I mean, those are all separate projects. So-
okay, so back in 2013, when the board had approved the SAD, we had to have a list of projects.
Right.
So how does that list of projects get worked into the road commission and their projects that they're saying to us? Or do we just say, like, they'll say, well, we went down this connector road, it's really
No.
bad, and is that on your list
So,
of projects?
2012, 2013, you know, the roads are becoming worse and worse. So we finally, the roads committee, convinced the township board, let's say we want to do something. Township board was like, yeah, we want to do something. So we came up with a plan. It's like, how much is it gonna cost? You know, David Reed was right. You know, we sat down, added up how much it's gonna cost. I think we used about $80,000 per mile, add up number of miles, came up with, you know, $85. We raise this, they'll take care of all the roads, and then we'll have some money in the out years and we go back and redo some of the roads. So that's how we came up with that. And then year one, I mean, there was some people like, let's do all the roads in year one. Well, for one, the road commission couldn't do all the roads in year one. The other thing is, if you do all the years and all the roads in year one, that means in year 6, you gotta do all, you know, so it's like, let's spread them out. So the decided was, we sort of divided the township into like 4 quadrants. We'll do some in this southwest, northwest, northeast. So year one, we did, you know, a portion of Marshall Road. The next year we did another portion of Marshall Road, next year another portion of Marshall Road. Same like the Delhi's. We start here, and you know, and eventually after 3 or 4 years, we had done all the roads, all the local gravel roads. And that's what it reflects here. You can see 14, 15, and 16 was a lot of money was being spent on improving. Obviously year one, you know, the most. So that's how it sort of, you know, decided what to do and when to do it. There was a local roads committee working with the road commission. It's like, how much can you do in 1 year, and trying to balance that out. Then some roads, you know, a little bit more complicated, like Tubbs Road, that got pushed back a couple of years just because we had to meet with the neighbors and work out, you know, engineering solutions. So yeah, that was how this whole thing. And then 18 and 19, obviously nothing really was done. 20, we started doing things, did some things in 20. And it is sort of interesting because, you know, people say this list of roads, which I've seen multiple lists of roads, and say, if it's not on the list, you can't do it. If it is on the list, you can do it, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's what, 5 or 6 projects on this, I won't call it a list, but on this spreadsheet that were not on this original list that the board approved. So I'm not sure, you know, I'm not the attorney, I'm not sure they've got a legal opinion, but obviously the township has added 5 or 6 roads that weren't on that original list, i.e. Craig Road, Delhi, April, Wing Meadows, that end up spending SAD money, it looks like, on those roads that weren't on that original list from 2013. So I'm not sure what, you know, I think that's a question Mike Homey is, can you do projects that are not on that list?
So going back to the road commission's list, so would that list be like a project on that list? Would that be a connector road, or is it any road under their purview?
No, because we told them the money was only for the connector roads, the gravel and the paved connector roads.
Okay.
So that's what we knew going in. We weren't doing subdivisions, we were just doing, you know, the roads that are listed here, these, whatever it is, like 28 miles or 27 miles, whatever the number is, something like that, yeah.
Okay, so
that's the early criteria, just these roads.
okay, so now that they're presenting to us right now their project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, now it's in sort of the blue column.
Okay, no, this is what we decided, but the road commission gives us a list of roads that they're saying that should be done.
Right. Well, when I got about last year, what I did is I took the list that I created this list and looked at what road haven't we done? So in last year, you know, it's like, it's been 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. And then also like Streeter, you were on the committee last year, right? Yeah. I mean, people came in and said, Streeter's in bad shape. And there's some other roads, Delhi, section of, I think East Delhi was in bad shape. Went out and looked at it and it's like, oh, and you look on the list, hadn't been done for 6 or 7 years. Some of the roads had already been in the queue for a second time. So then what I did for the out years, they're like, it's really not that complicated. Just look at what's due. What's due is like changing the oil on your car. It's like, okay, this road was done 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Let's go look at it. It probably needs another 4-inch lift of limestone. So that's where, because obviously 18, 19, nothing was done. So I said, let's get back in the cycle of every so many years. And obviously a lot depends on how much traffic's on that road. If it's a dead end, connector road, a lot less traffic, you can go longer. Some of the busier ones, yeah, you gotta do it more frequent. So that's where myself working with the road commission, because obviously I know all those people, let's develop this. And that's why I developed this sort of a guide going forward that you can continue to update this and, be self-sufficient as far as what needs to be done next. Like I said, basically like changing the oil in your car. It's like, okay, it's probably next year you can sort of predict And not, you know, and then you go out and look to make sure, maybe that road doesn't need it, you can defer it a year or so. So, does that explain process?
Yeah, so has there ever been something on the list from the road commission that we did not have on our list? You know, like when they're driving around, they're like, hey, you know,
Yes.
yeah.
So before, I mean, yeah, obviously in 20, I'm guessing, because there wasn't a roads committee, right, in 20?
2018 and 19 is when it, like around it, right after 2017 is when it fizzled out, and I think Lou was still kind of running things, and then they had their ad hoc committee that Jack put together, and they were meeting at Grand Traverse, so I don't know what, there's no
Yeah,
minutes
so I don't
or
know,
anything, so I don't know what they were
2020
doing.
came up with the list, but that's, you know, the road commission maybe did, I wasn't involved in
Okay.
2020, who did that list?
2020, so that was, that had to be the new road. It was Jack, Jay Houghton, Lou.
And they were the ones that did like Craig Road, which was not on the original list. The board approved it, but, and sometimes they'll come in and say, hey, this bridge or this culvert or whatever is failing. You know, that wouldn't show up in here because it's not, you know, we're just looking at pavement surface, you know, and we'll get into that in the presentation. And I think that was a question Kathleen asked.
Okay.
The road commission report is road surfaces. That number, that 776 or 756, 757, whatever that number is if you just want to take care of the road surfaces, which is fine. This is, which is one component. But also if you want to take care of culverts, which fail, culverts are under the road, so you need to, so we had budgeted in this thing, my last one, we were budgeted $100,000 a year for culverts. So you'd have money in there, so when a culvert fails, you had money. Also, the township's responsible for bridges, drainage improvements. We also, we're gonna set aside money for the whole TAP initiative. Remember, we thought we had set money originally the goal when this was set up. And we thought, oh, we're gonna set 10% aside for transportation alternative programs. So we can safely get people across Jackson Road. We can put in sidewalks. So it's gonna be 10% a year. So it's gonna be $500,000. There's this whole controversy. Was it done first? No. Looks like, oh, we did it in 2020. Oh, we did it. We found out, oh, they didn't do it right in 2020. So that's what we said. Let's do it right this time. I mean, let's at least make that an option. The committee and the board. So that's where, you know, you go from 776 up to 1.1. We included that. We included paved approaches for the gravel roads. That wasn't, you know, that wasn't budgeted before too. So that's where, yeah, it goes up. It's about $350,000. We want to do more than just paved surfaces. We want to take care of drainage. We want to take care of culverts. We want to take care of paved approaches. We want to make sure the pedestrians could safely get from this area to this area, have money set aside because of pathways, preserves, and PPP pathways, parks, isn't really set up for some urban areas like Jackson Plaza. Is that really, you know, the sidewalks we put in there? That's what, you know, so those are some of the things that we had discussions on, setting that money aside so there would be money available at the township to, you know, because there's sidewalk gaps all over.
Yeah.
So like, boy, it should be nice if we had money designated to fill those moving forward. So that was the, so.
When you said brought up drainage, do you mean like a drainage area or like the culverts and
Cleaning out
ditches?
ditches, cleaning out, you know, just routines, you know, sometimes more than routine, because sometimes we need to replace this culvert and actually improve the drainage in this area. And when we talked about doing all the roads, that was the other thing is, you know, we talked about not just these 27 miles, there's about 30 miles of paved and gravel subdivisions. So we talk about doing all the roads. Some of these subdivision roads, they were put in 30, 40 years ago. The ditches are non-existent. And so their culverts are plugged. So really you need to go back and clean out those ditches, sometimes replace driveway culverts. So there's stuff for drainage improvements if we were to go back in and do the gravel subs and the paved subs. So that's why it's more comprehensive than just the pavement surface.
Yeah, that brings up a question. If it was a SAD, could we do private roads or even a millage? Because
No, you can't.
so there's a lot of subdivisions that are private. Saginaw Hills is one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't spend public money on private.
Right.
roads.
Okay. So, yeah, okay. Well, so do you want to segue right into your presentation then? Or does anybody have any questions or comments or anything?
I just wanted to throw a comment. So at last night's Board of Trustees meeting, Evan Pratt came from the Washtenaw County Water Resource Commission and made a really good presentation talking about how Washtenaw County Water Resource spends its money. And he made a point about cleaning out ditches and cleaning out culverts under the purview of the Washington County Water Resource Commission, saying that he gets calls, I've got water in my ditch, I've never had an overflowing ditch here before. But the county drain commission, water commission cannot clean a drain or replace a culvert for a private citizen because they ask for it to be done. It has to be something that's connected to a county drain in order for them to actually contribute and do the work. Otherwise, it needs to be done privately or by another function of governmental. So it sort of segues into what you were talking about. There should definitely be an escrow put to the side for some of these spots where we know there's a water problem. It's a road that's going to continue to fail. Is it an engineering thing that needs to be done, or is it just a culvert that needs to be replaced or a ditch that needs to be cleaned?
And the road commission could clean,
Mhm.
culverts and ditches.
Right.
And
That's what I said, if we did all the roads, all the subdivision roads, there are, like I said, a lot of those, the drainage really is not working. So you could add limestone, but really not gonna help. You need to improve, not do ditching in all of it, but spot ditching to get the water off the road into the ditch and get it away. So that's where it's more comprehensive, not just one component.
I want to add in our discussion about this. It was in the middle of some discussions we were having with neighborhoods. And it was just really difficult. And our thought was, if on the table was the idea of subdivisions would just be taken care of in a cycle, we would avoid all of that conflict and division in neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And so
Well-
that was part of our rationale as well.
Were you here for the Park Ridge?
Yeah.
You were here, yes, and then I know you were here. Yeah, that was one of the parts of the discussion was their drainage and I didn't know I was supposed to clean this out, Yeah, and we don't think about it until we have a backup. Bob, your presentation, do you want that on the screen? Because we do have, and Mike Homier is here tonight. I can see he's logged in. He will be answering questions and giving his advice about the 3 different funding sources.
Is this the guy?
That's the guy. Yeah, it hasn't been adjusted. To be honest, after seeing the note from Will Hathaway on the 14th and then Jillian's subsequent questions, a lot of the things we were looking at got put to Mike Homier and Foster Swift. So until we got those answers, it didn't really seem value add to keep plugging along on this. So this hasn't changed since the last meeting. Basically, what we're trying to do is, what are the township options now that the township-wide SAT pretty much is done? The last collection was in the winter taxes this year, collected that we're doing in February. So if you go to the next slide, obviously, the township can do nothing. Tried not to be terribly subjective in this, but I think it was easy to say as a group, since they created us, to actually look at the roads, that we could pretty safely say that doing nothing isn't recommended. If anyone objects to that, let me know, but I think that was fairly straightforward. So if the township decides to do something, they need money. Then the question is, where do they get the money from? They can tap into the general fund. The idea that the general fund has $500,000 or more sitting idle every year, if that's the case, we've got bigger problems than just doing the road. So that didn't really seem like a good recommendation. So that left essentially 3 options, 2 related to a millage and 1 related to reconsidering another SAD. From a millage, the township, and again, the amounts are TBD, don't anyone get focused on numbers. There are no hard numbers. The only numbers in here are really rough estimates just to give some guidelines. We'll get into that in a minute. So we don't know what a millage amount would be because we don't know actually what we want. And that's one of the decisions later on that the board's going to have to make. The board does have the ability to impose a levy. They do not have to go to the voters. They can just say, we are going to put this in. I think it was what, Act 51 from 1951. I think that's what your note said. So the board can unilaterally do something. They can also go out to the voters and just say, given what we want to do and outline it, this is roughly what it's going to be. Do you approve? And put it out for an election. And the last thing, and there's no concerns and there's pros and cons to all of these, so we're just gonna say they can do another township-wide SAD. So those are the three funding, barring Bill Gates or Elon Musk just coming and dumping $1 billion on us, that we could see. Those seemed improbable, so we didn't list them. Go to the next one. Secondary objectives. This gets into part of what we've discussed tonight, part of what we've discussed previously. And this gets into, I think Roy brought it up initially with you, Jillian and Jessica, of should we expand the scope? So the Board of Trustees, should they decide to continue funding the road, can do it at the current level, and we can outline what that would be. We can do the numbers. It's going to take some time. Or we can give them other options saying, if you want to expand it, like you want to include all the subdivision roads, whether they're gravel or paved, and start putting in a cycle of renewal, we can give you a rough number for that as well. So should the board do this, we need to give them the numbers so they can make an informed decision. And then we've got things that are currently ambiguous. Primary sidewalks. But I'm sure there are others. And should we start as part of this process to outline where should funding for these things that are ambiguous come from? There really may not be groups who are going to sit down and do this as a township-wide look. They may end up doing it from their own narrower perspective. So does it come from road funding? Should sidewalks that lead up to bus stops become out of the bus millage renewal? Does the DDA have any say in this, whether we need to put new crosswalks in or other things on Jackson Road, or do what Ann Arbor does for some of these busier ones where they put in the lights and they flash and you know you have to. Should anything come from parks as we try to connect neighborhoods to the parks that we all enjoy? So as we were talking about this, that as a secondary objective, it would be nice to put forward to the board at least some initial thoughts of how do you holistically within the township look at everything and figure out how do we pay for the things we want to do going forward in the township. So that's what the secondary objectives were. This slide on sources and miles. County primary roads, roughly 49 miles, Z, Wagner, Miller, et cetera. This comes from state gas tax, county millage, DDA. I'm sure there's others, but these are the primary sources. The county local roads, where there's a little more than 25 miles. This is East Delhi Park, Marshall, Pratt. These are things we kind of are familiar with. Some of this comes because the county does work routine maintenance. So some of the gas tax county millage goes to the DDA money, but the township-wide SAD kicks in as well. Subdivision roads, Polo Fields, Snowberry Ridge, Park Ridge Drive. Funding source, our neighborhood SADs or other ways. These are sort of on their own at this point. And then private roads, as we've talked, there is no taxpayer funding. People who live on a private road, you're on your own. I speak from experience, having just paid to put some gravel down on ours. Again, on the township-wide SAD, and this is one of the drawbacks on the SAD, you can only use it for funds that were part of the approved version, or, and this caused some concern, anything that was officially approved subsequently. What the official approval process is to amend or adjust an SAD, to be honest, I don't know. There has to be one. There's always ways to amend. But we haven't done it so far. So should this be a path going forward, we should know the process to amend should that need arise. And the approved project list, we've hashed that over many times. There didn't seem to be any reason to put this in here. So what did we learn in the last 10 years? First and foremost, education on roads needs to be better. I think that goes to everyone in the township, including all of us. What's covered in routine maintenance and repair, so people understand what they can expect as far as what's going to be handled, what the SAD can or can't do, what the road, and what's not here is what the road commission can or can't do. Who do you go to? Who do you ask? We've talked about this many times in our meetings since we formed in November of 21. We really need to start documenting and getting this out visible to the public of who to go to about what. Some people have a better idea of how their taxpayer dollars are being used. I think it's safe to say the local gravel roads are in better shape than they were going back to 2013. We talked last time, I think the prime example is if you look at most of them and then you look at that section of park that we haven't touched, most of the gravel roads are better, and that's due to the SAD money. Again, that's subjective, but I think I can say that with reasonable confidence. There haven't really been that many issues with the SAD. The issues have been what was in, what can we spend it on, but there haven't been any things that have come up that have been firm roadblocks, at least that I'm aware of, and we haven't talked of any. $85 a parcel is easy to understand. And the other thing we've learned is whatever funding effort goes forward, it's got to be clear, whether it's millage, an SAD, or anything else, exactly what the township intends to do and how they're going to do it. That takes away a lot of the confusion, and again, it gets back into better education of everyone. This is current road maintenance. If you go back and look at the county primary roads, basically Washington County Road Commission is responsible for pretty much the routine maintenance. Items are listed, snow removals, storm damage cleanup, grading, marking signs, pothole filling, whatever. They're also responsible for the necessary work on other things like pavements. Should have fixed this, culverts, not culvers. I'm sure culverts would be happy to get all the Washington County signs directing people to their business, and bridges. Local roads, routine maintenance is again the county, same things. Work on pavements, culverts, and bridges, that's the township. Subdivision, again, the county does the basic routine maintenance. Township ultimately is responsible for pavements, culverts, or bridges, or should be private, or whatever the subdivision has to figure out how to do it themselves. And private roads, just to be clear, you're on your own. Future funding, Roy pretty much covered this. However, the township decides to go forward. It doesn't matter the option. These three items are things we know we need to budget for. So whatever funding option, better include money set aside for these, because we're going to spend the money as a township anyway. For anyone not looking at this online, it's the paved approach on the local roads, subdivision SAD preventive maintenance, which is part of the SAD agreement with people who do their private one, as long as it's not a private road sub SAD, and culvert replacement when they fail. Again, we have the ability to put together options for the Board of Trustees of if you don't want to just repeat what we've done, we can increase the funding to cover additional items. Texas Township, again, they've done an SAD. This isn't saying we have to do this with an SAD, but they've done it through an SAD. They expanded theirs to basically cover all roads, except of course, private roads. Let's keep repeating that just for the sake of argument, again, since I live on it, or live on one. But we as a group can define, recognizing any type of incremental versus covering them all is more work defining what is in that incremental, and then work of what the estimate would be for whether it's a per parcel or a millage funding requirement would be. We can go, and Roy's done the back of the envelope, full bore what we think it would be to include all the subdivision, paved and gravel roads that aren't private. Paved roads have a certain life expectancy before they have to be repaved. We know what those are. We can come up with estimates. And again, we as a group can come up with, not do the full board, but do something else. We just have to figure out what it is, should we want to take forward to the board, and should the board want to consider something above and beyond what we're currently doing. So this is just giving the board options to consider, because in the end, this is a political decision. And as I said, I think, Roy, when you did your discussion with Jessica and Jillian, I think you used the 185 as the rough back of the envelope, quick, based on how many miles of paved road, and approximation of what it was going to cost to repave on a 30-year cycle for a paved road and shorter for a gravel road. But again, these are not hard and fast numbers.
Roy, the meeting that we had, you had it was a sheet. I don't see it in the presentation, but it was about the millage, and you had 1 mil or 0.5, 1 mil, 2 mil, or whatever, and how much per year, or
Yeah, it's actually in the road commission's local road report. I just got it out of there.
Oh,
So
okay.
It's the same thing, you know.
kind of a,
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
where,
and we should have it in our,
yeah, we can.
And so it's in here.
Yeah, we've got that. Again,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't update this from February. I
It's in
saw
the
the
packet,
list
right?
from Mike Homier, or to Mike Homier, and it was,
yeah.
let's get his. But again, yeah, we have a rough idea of what the millage would be.
It's from page 26.
Oh, thank you.
of the report.
I'm just looking now, I'm sharing it.
Do we have any specific questions for Mr. Homey, since we've got him, so we don't keep it for the whole meeting?
Not specific, because he's here to talk about the 3 funding options. Oh,
Should we just finish?
okay, there you go. Well, this would be part of the presentation, I would think.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's
we-
one of the
yes.
funding.
Just, if you skip to the last page, which is the next step. We presented that February, we're redoing this. We were looking for input from people to update. We've got to get more information in here. We know what the number of parcels are currently versus what they were. We have a rough idea of the mills, whether it's keep it at the current funding level versus copying Texas Township and doing a full bore. We didn't do anything in between. But we have a rough idea of what those are. And I think most importantly, and this is going to be something that's going to take time, each of the 3 funding approaches has some pros and cons. We need to document them in getting this in front of the Board of Trustees, just so that they've got the most factual, for lack of a better word, information in front of them. The intent of all of this, and as we were putting this together, there was a considerable effort to try to keep subjective perspectives out of this and try to keep it just to the data. I think that's ultimately what we owe the board is, here's what we know. Here's the source if you want to know the source. But this is what we think your options are. Whether or not we make a recommendation, that's up to us. But ultimately, the board is going to be the ones who determine, do we keep doing road work? And if so, at what level? And how are we going to fund it?
And the more information, the better, please.
More information, the better.
I mean, so we don't have more to do.
Yeah.
Um, Did you receive any feedback? You requested, from our committee, I believe, but then anybody, we had quite a few people in attendance. Did you receive feedback in between? No, okay, and I know that Kathleen had sent in her,
For us,
which,
yeah, and we were going to cover that. I
fine.
mean, yeah,
okay.
the 185 was, again, the rough estimate for doing everything. It wasn't a continue at business as usual.
Any feedback or questions?
It was an excellent report. I think you did a really great job of keeping it factual and very clear. Thank you.
The big thing is going to be getting some of the answers back, and I don't know if Mike's got them now or not. But it's going to be sitting down and, all right, what are the pros and cons of each approach? Because there are going to be legal questions and there are going to be political questions, and those are outside the jurisdiction of this committee. But we should do our best to outline what we know of them so that those questions get answered.
Well, whatever we do, it must be, have an attorney review, make sure everything we're doing is legal. Because we can have an idea of what we want, and if it doesn't match what is supposed to be legally, then,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's.
and then also, whatever we do, we must have a plan, because, and you know, we're short-staffed in Township Hall. So, I mean, this is a lot of information, and who's going to take this over and make sure that we're doing it properly. I mean, because it's not just us, there's the assessor, there's, you know, the treasurer,
And that's
and
part of the whole pros and cons. We've talked about this, having a township project manager would solve a lot of ours, but until there's someone there,
yeah, and
we can't solve that. We can just note it that having someone in that role would make things easier.
mhm. And we have our interim manager right now, so then we'll have to go, it's out there to attract a permanent, but then there's a whole learning curve with that person. So we're kind of in a strange situation, growing, but we've got those lots of plans, but not the support, some support. So should we bring Mike in now? Are you okay with that? Okay, can you let him in on this computer?
Yeah. Bear with me.
Okay.
Sorry, Mike, I'm trying to. Should be here. I'm
Well,
trying to
he's-
stop sharing, and that's the trouble I'm having. Just give me a minute.
Okay, so while you're doing that, so we did have questions go to Mike. Now, there he is. Since it did, the answers did go to the board, and Mike, I don't know, I know the board hasn't approved for the client attorney privilege for those answers to be released. So I'm gonna leave this up to you to make sure things are right.
Sure, and good evening. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to answer questions. And I'll try and keep within what I think you want me to address. So let's start with funding options. And I want to start with the private road issue only because it was brought up a couple times. You're correct that private road owners are on their own, but only to an extent. Act 188 is the only act, in fact, that I know of that allows the government to actually collect money, public money, from those people that are benefited and use that to improve private roads. And there's a specific provision under Act 188 that allows the board to do that. You could not take general taxpayer money other than those that are benefited from that road and spend it on a private road, but you can improve private roads using a special assessment district. So for example, if a bunch of neighbors got together and petitioned the township board to create a special assessment district to improve that private road, you could assess those costs. Yeah, actually, the township board could pay the cost up front to do the improvement in the anticipation of collection of those special assessments over time or in a lump sum, depending on how the township board wanted to frame that. So
Mike?
Yep.
So under a township-wide SAD, would in private properties, parcels would be paying into the township-wide, would they still be able to have their roads improved under a township-wide?
no. And that's
Okay.
because you couldn't take other public money and spend them on a private road.
Okay,
So what happens is, typically those people that live on private roads have to travel over the public roads to get to the private road, but not vice versa, right? So people who live on public roads don't have to travel over private roads to get to their roads. So they would never use typically those private roads, if that makes sense.
okay, sorry, Bob, I tried.
So let's talk about the funding options, because I think Bob also said that, this is going to involve legal and policy decisions. The legal decisions are actually fairly simple. There are a few ways in which you can fund road improvements, and they've been discussed as part of Bob's report, which is, you could use general fund monies to pay for roads. That's fine. Special assessment districts are authorized under Act 188. And you go through that process, and that's fine too. The township board could issue bonds in anticipation of special assessment collections. So you would set up a special assessment district, issue bonds to do road work, and then collect the money that way. Or you could pay it from the general fund, set up a special assessment district, and refund or reimburse the general fund for those expenditures as well. Or set up a township revolving fund and pay money out of that to fund road improvements, and set up a special assessment district to then provide the revenue stream for that debt liability, that debt obligation. So you also talked about an extra voted millage. So you can put the question on the ballot, and you can levy an extra voted millage for road construction and improvement. That's certainly authorized by law. And then the other one that was mentioned was pursuant to MCL 247.670, which allows the township, any township, to levy up to 3 mills annually for road improvements. Now, you have to enter into an agreement with the road commission for that, but typically they're willing to do that because you're taking those funds and spending it on roads. I suspect that in the context of that road agreement, you could designate those projects as well on an annual basis, so that you could say, here, we're going to levy 3 mills annually, or whatever the number is, for road improvements, and then designate those road improvements in an agreement with the road commission on an annual basis. So those are all possibilities, but the legal issues are not that complicated in terms of those processes. It's the policy decisions. And really, I like to focus on the objective. So if the township is, if your objective is to contribute money to the roads, which you have no legal liability for. I mean, legally, you have not, you don't have any responsibility for any roads, period. You don't have to contribute $1. If you choose to, and many of our clients do, then the funding mechanisms are fairly straightforward. You just have to pick one.
Ask a question.
Go ahead.
Mike, Jeff Hubert here. In Bob's presentation, he listed 4 different things, which you've touched on 3 of them. Do another thing I understand, probably, well, actually, you've touched on all 4 of them. But the general fund in Bob's report is not recommended. Do you, from a legal standpoint, is there any reason that the general fund approach would be not recommended?
Well, so if you're talking about simply expending money from the general fund for roads, then you can do that. What that means is that to the extent that you have dedicated dollars now for roads out of the general fund, that either is going to come from somewhere else where you have to cut those expenditures, or you're going to have to produce enough revenue to make up for those expenditures from the general fund. Otherwise, you'll be expending general fund dollars for that purpose. Now, you can, it's not legally, you're certainly permitted to do that. What generally happens, however, if townships are going to spend money out of the general fund, they will expend that money for the purposes of getting the project done, getting the construction done, but they'll also form that special assessment district so that they will recoup those funds with interest over time. So it's really a loan of taxpayer money for these projects with the repayment over time. The same holds true for like bond issues. You know, if you're going to issue bonds for a project, and so, and those really are dependent upon whether or not they're big projects, small projects. So for example, you probably wouldn't issue bonds for a project that's $500,000. Why? Because unless you're doing a private placement with a bank, then your cost to sell those bonds is probably not worth it. You might as well just fund it out of the general fund and collect those payments then over time. And generally speaking, you wouldn't want to go over 10 years and maybe even less depending on that, the amount of the project.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, just to clarify, so Act 188, the township-wide SAD, like Texas Township has renewed and we did initially. I keep hearing different people in the community saying, that's illegal, that's illegal. Just to be clear, that is a legal option for Scio Township to renew that, go through that process again a second time?
Yeah, so all special assessments are subject to the same standard, right? Which is there a benefit conferred, right? And is the special assessment disproportionate to that benefit conferred? Now, roads are traditionally hard to determine what the benefit conferred is. So if I said to you, okay, you've got this piece of property and the road in front of it is pristine. Now let's compare that to that same property where it's a gravel road. Well, what is the difference in market value of those two properties, right? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those properties with those improvements versus those properties without those improvements. And that's the legal standard that the tax tribunal will look at if somebody were to appeal that special assessment. But it's not per se unlawful. In fact, it's the other way around. So every special assessment is presumed valid, and the petitioner has a heavy burden to show by credible market evidence that the assessment is disproportionate to the benefit conferred. But even if you took the position, and arguably you could, that it does not confer a particularized benefit to those properties throughout the township, all you'd have to do is split it up into smaller special assessment districts, right? So carve up now the township into quadrants, right? And do special assessments for those quadrants. The same holds true. I mean, all you'd end up doing is shrinking down the size of each special assessment district. So you'd end up with more, but you'd cover the entire township for those projects within those quadrants. And then you would assess those costs accordingly to the parcels in that quadrant that are benefited. Okay. So again, rather than focus on sort of the legality of it, tell me what the objective is, because I can get to the same objective for you by using different funding tools, and it really doesn't necessarily matter. I'll give you an example. So if you do a township-wide special assessment for $85, well, that's all well and good. I can get you the same $85 per parcel by levying a millage under 247.670. We're just going to back into that $85 for every parcel that we levy that millage on.
Follow-up question to that. The text when we set ours up, we listed, X number of roads, 25 road segments. Texas Township did the approach with all local roads. I guess in hindsight, if we were to do it again, it seems like it'd be simpler if we listed all local roads rather than trying to, because it seems like there's some controversies like, was it on the original list? Wasn't it on the original list? And we've done some projects that weren't on the list. Now there's this controversy, can you do a project that's not on the list? I'm not sure that answer, I'm not asking that answer, but I guess I'm just thinking going forward, just seems like it'd be, make it simpler if we listed all local roads or like Texas Township did.
Yeah, so, Act 188 allows a special assessment for the construction, improvement, and maintenance of public roads. Right? So when we drafted the documents for Texas, because Texas is my client, what we did was we expanded we give them the greatest amount of flexibility to improve those roads as they deem necessary. So annually, right, they collect those special assessments and they get to then determine, okay, which projects are we going to do this year? How much have we collected? Which projects fit within that? And, it doesn't necessarily even preclude the township from pitching in some additional general fund money if they determine it to be necessary.
Yeah, hi, Mike. You say that it has to confer a benefit on the property. You cited a property that is on a pristine road and one that is on a gravel road. And I can understand that, living on the pristine road might be desirable. What if the house is not on the road at all? What if it's on a private road and therefore there is no conferred benefit on that property? Is it still legal?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the first question that I'll answer your question with a question, although I hate doing it, but I'll ask you, how do you get to that private road?
You drive on the regular road that has the benefit. But would a tax assessor, in trying to figure out that benefit, agree that there is a benefit?
So it's a good question. And like I said, notoriously, roads are very difficult to ascertain what the conferred benefit is, what the market value, the credible market evidence says. And so, we do that with appraisals, right? So if you get appeals, then you engage an appraiser. Now, let me say this, okay? Within the universe of special assessment appeals, it's difficult to envision a scenario where the tax tribunal is going to conclude that a special assessment over a 10-year period for $850 is disproportionate to the benefit conferred over that same 10-year period. In other words, it's not dollar for dollar. It is a ratio. That ratio is anywhere between probably at the low end 1.5 times to 2.6 times. So we know that if a assessment is 2.6 times the benefit conferred, the tax tribunal has said that's disproportionate, constitutes an unlawful taking, okay? But the tribunal has also said that a special assessment that is 1.5 times the benefit conferred is lawful. It's that area between 1.5 and 2.6 that is in the gray area. And when does that become disproportionate? Is it just 2.6 and everything below that is okay? Or is it somewhere between 1.5 and 2.6? And so, even though you might want to think of it as a dollar for dollar increase in property value. So if I said to you, well, it's $850, and so the market value of my property has to go up $850. Remember, that's $850 over a 10-year period. And now you have to prove by market evidence that that's disproportionate to having well-kept roads. And it's very difficult to overcome the presumption of validity.
Mike, so living on a public road, not private, but public, and paying into a special assessment, but my road is not improved, if I went to the tax tribunal and said, well, I'm paying into the special assessment and my roads weren't improved, that would be okay. And also other parcels that have not paid into the special assessment. So we are paying into the roads, but not receiving a benefit. So we could say, well, the road over there was paved, so that's gonna raise the value of my road that's never been done. That doesn't seem, that seems more like a millage type concept rather than a special assessment, where
Yeah.
there's supposed to be a special benefit. So this is where the difference, and Texas Township has done all their local roads from the beginning. I read through their original resolutions, minutes, and all of that. So yeah, this is where there's been a lot of issues with this whole connector road, and then the rest of the roads not being improved, but we're all paying into it, except, and then the general public is benefiting from those connector roads as well.
Yeah, but so the, take, for the most part anyways, the general public is the entire township.
Well,
Agreed?
also Ann Arbor comes through and,
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean,
yeah.
people do travel through, but aside from that, right? So again, I'll ask you this question.
Mhm.
Let's suppose that the township decided that we're not going to contribute one more dollar to improving roads in the township, not $1. Do you think over time your property values would go up or go down?
Well, I live in a really crappy dirt road, so I think it's gonna stay the same no matter what. Yeah, if it was a paved road and it was being, broken down, that would be a different situation, but gravel, which we have, 29 miles of gravel road. That's an interesting, question.
Yeah, and so
Goes by the type of road, wouldn't it?
well, I don't know that it doesn't necessarily go by the type of road, but rather the improvement, right? But the real issue is the presumption of validity and the market evidence to show that the assessment is disproportionate. That means that the lower the amount of the assessment, the more difficult it is to overcome that presumption. And in some cases, it's almost impossible.
Okay.
Now, I like to focus on the objective, because we could have an argument all day long about whether or not an assessment confers that benefit or doesn't confer that benefit. It really, again, it doesn't matter, because I can get the township to the same place using a different tool if you don't want to do a special assessment.
So, there's another question. So a millage, we talked about, I think this the other day, or I don't know, there's been so many conversations. So a millage is subject to the Headley rollback, but with a millage, we would have to go to the vote, or we wouldn't have to, but let's say we do go to the voters, we would lay out, we're going to improve all local roads. So then, would we be able to do, we wouldn't have to list the details of projects that we would with a special assessment district?
Yes. So the purpose would be described in the ballot language itself, right? And that ballot language would say for the improvement, maintenance, and construction of public roads, period, right? Why would you narrow it beyond that? And that way, that allows you to expend those funds on any public roads.
But then we're subject to the Headley rollback. So after, if we say 5, we would want to have a shorter time period.
Yeah. So, if it's subject to, and I'll go over this in just one second, but
okay.
Typically the millage will be subject to the Headley rollback, which means then you have a declining revenue stream, particularly in the face of rising costs, right? And so over time, long periods of time, you're going to be decreasing the revenue available because those costs are going up. The projects get more expensive, and yet you have less money unless you have a lot of additions to taxable value over that same period of time to keep pace. Right now, you've got 8% inflation. You've got now a 5% cap on the rise in taxable value. So you still have a 3% gap between those. Okay, so that's why, you know, the revenue stream is likely, if inflation was long-term like that, the revenue stream would never keep up with those costs. Now, having said that, there's a case out there that's gotten just a little attention, and it involved Oshtemo Township. And that case, what happened was Oshtemo Township is a charter township, and because they're a charter township, their operating millage that they can levy is 5 mils, okay, by constitutional limitation. But they were only levying, I want to say 0.9 mils, and they decided that they needed more operating millage to run the township. So they decided to raise their millage without a vote of the electorate, something that would otherwise violate the Headley Amendment to the Constitution, except that they had that authority pre-ratification of the Headley Amendment. The Headley Amendment occurred in 1978. So the Court of Appeals said, oh, no. Oshtemo Township was a charter township. They had that authority pre-ratification of Headley, and therefore they could raise it without a vote of the people, okay? The same may hold true for a millage in this instance, particularly under 247.670, so because there are two ways in which you can raise revenue under that statutory section. One is annually, you can levy up to 3 mils. That means you're not going to be subject to Headley because you would do it on an annual basis, right? There would be no room for a Headley rollback in that situation. So you would say by resolution 1 year, let's just take round numbers. By resolution 1 year, you would say, okay, we're going to levy 1 mil for the construction, improvement, maintenance of public roads. The next year comes around, you adopt a resolution. We're going to levy 1 mil for maintenance, construction, improvements of public roads, right? So you'd never get to a Headley rollback on that millage because you're levying it every year, okay?
So that would be, would we, and I was going to ask you about if we don't go to the voters, which, but we decide to do a millage for the 3 mils, let's say. So it would be similar to, like every year we would still have our budget and regarding that money and what improvements we wanted to do. Would we still will we have public hearings? I may be mixing this up with Public Act 33 a little bit because, you know, we talked about that last night. So what is the benefit of, or what is the protocol and the nuances of a non-voted millage?
So I think it's simply by resolution. So the board adopts a resolution saying they're going to levy up to 3 mils. Now it doesn't have to be up to, it could be 1 mil or it could be 1.5 mils. The benefit to it is on an annual basis, you can adjust it to meet your project needs for that particular year, right? So on an annual basis, you could say, okay, this year we're going to do projects of $500,000. We need to levy 0.5 mils to meet those expenses.
And we can just continue to do that into the future as long as we wanted?
Yes.
Because we have that right to do so.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, also under that same statutory section, that section says, notwithstanding any other provisions of this act, the township board of any township may also levy a property tax of not to exceed 3 mils on each dollar of assessed valuation of the township in any year for the maintenance or improvements of county roads within the township or for the widening of state trunk line highways as aforesaid, without submitting the question to the electors of said township, and pay any sum so raised into the county road fund of the county for the aforesaid purposes pursuant to an agreement with the county road commission. And then it says, provided that in addition to the foregoing powers, any township may, when authorized by a vote of the electorate, levy a property tax of not to exceed 6 mils on each dollar of assessed valuation of the township in any year for the maintenance or improvement of county roads or for the widening of state trunk line highways beyond the width required for state trunk line traffic in unincorporated areas of the township, and pay any sum so raised into the county road fund, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that 6 mils, if you were to go to the vote of the people under this statutory section, there is an argument to be made that is not subject to Headley rollback. Why? Because that authority was authorized pre-1978. The last amendment to the McNitt Act occurred in 1957, which meant it predated the ratification of Headley and may not be subject to a Headley rollback. Now, we're looking at that issue from all kinds of angles for other clients and other things, but it may be an important issue here for the township if it is not subject to Headley rollback, because then you could have that millage on a long-term basis, even if it is extra voted millage, and not be subject to a declining revenue stream.
Well, that's a thought. Well, I mean, questions or?
I know I threw a lot at you.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about, but, what do you?
I was wondering, this is why I didn't include all of this in here. I never would have gotten it.
Just to be clear, Mr. Homier, this is Linda Smith. You were citing MCL 247.6 for the 3-point mills,
0.670.
670.
So it's in MCL, it's 0.670.
It's Public Act 51.
It is.
Yeah.
51 of 1951.
Yeah. They did a lot in 1951.
So, the objective is still the issue, right?
Yes.
Does the township want to fund roads? And if so, how do you choose to do it?
Well, I think that's the easiest question out of them all, right?
It is and it's not, right? Because what happens is you could say, well, yeah, we want to fund roads. And if you say, yes, we want to fund roads, then just levy a property tax not to exceed 3 mills every year and be done.
So speaking of that 3 mills, so that's for road improvements. So could that also be for sidewalks and culverts? Wasn't that what we were talking about earlier? Because
culverts are arguably within the context of road improvements.
okay.
Sidewalks, probably not.
Oh. And if we had an extra voted millage, we could, for roads, we could also include sidewalks in that. And then also with a special assessment district, we could include sidewalks, because under Public Act 188, it does list sidewalks as one of the improvements, but then they're listing them separately. Would that be a separate SAD, or could it be included in one?
No, you could include it in one, but it gets
Okay.
a little more tenuous than with sidewalks than it does with roadways, right? Like I can make a very good argument that even if your road is not improved, you benefit from the improvement of other roads because you drive on them. It's harder to make that argument with sidewalks.
Okay. Anything else?
Just another question on the SAD. Once the SAD has been formulated, can it be changed?
Good question. And the answer is no, I don't believe it can. I think once you have that, and there was a case, it was, it's ND Development, I think it was, versus Sylvan Township. And that case, what happened was Sylvan Township decided that it was going to specially assess for a sewer project. And that sewer project, the plans and estimates of cost said they were going to build their own sewer treatment facility. And so they started the assessment for that, started assessing property owners. And somewhere along the line, they changed their mind and they said, oh, no, we're not going to build our own system. We're going to build now an interceptor and connect to an existing system. And what the court said is even though it achieved the same purpose, right, of taking wastewater away, treating it, discharging it, it had the very same function, it was a different purpose and therefore you could not do it.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I didn't think of another question. The other thing that's sort of come up on this is we've collected this SAD for now 10 years. It looks like at the end of this, we're gonna have potentially $1 million left over. Do we have to spend it in 10 years or do we have more time to spend it versus collect it?
Yeah, so Act 188 is kind of interesting in as much as there's no time limit. There's a time limit on the duration or the existence of the district itself, but there's no time limit on when that improvement would have to be done. So, for example, you have a list, a project list, and there's some question about which list and when and whatever, but notwithstanding any of that, right? If you spent that money on that list, on those projects in the list, even if it was maintenance, because one of the project lists I saw included maintenance on there, then arguably you could continue spending that money on those projects. Now, I will say there is a surplus provision under Act 188, but that surplus provision applies to the original roll. And it says if it exceeds 5% of the original roll, then you may have to make a refund of that surplus. But it's not clear to me what is meant by the original roll, because when I look at a roll, I see, okay, here's what we're going to assess people for this special assessment. And let's just use round numbers and say it comes out to $5 million. Then if you collect 5% more than that original roll or 5% more than the 5 million, then you may have to make a refund. The problem is I don't see how you ever collect more than $5 million from that special assessment, minus, for example, any accrued interest on those when you collect them and invest them, okay? But there is that issue, and so you can't really just ignore it. But again, looking at your project list, provided you're spending it on that, I think you can continue to spend that. There's no set time period for when you have to spend that. There is a duration on when you can collect it, but not spend it. In fact, as long as you commit to doing the project under Act 188, you could actually say, okay, we're going to do this special assessment. We're going to levy these special assessments. We'll let you pay in installments for 10 years. And then when we collect enough money to do the project, we'll do the project in 10 years.
But the person may not own the parcel then.
That's right.
There would be no, well, but it doesn't, it's not supposed to benefit the person, it benefits the parcel.
That's right. That's the same reason why any refund of any surplus goes to the property owner at the time the refund is made, not who paid it.
Okay. My mind is still spinning 2 days in a row. Linda, anything? No? Are
Thank
we-
you.
Yeah, I guess,
Thank you.
Mike, thank you. I'm sure that we'll, as we unfold this process, we have a lot more to go over before we get to the point of recommending to the board. Well, we may have more questions. But
Yeah, if I had to, you know, again, I would just urge you to focus on the objective, because if the objective is to fund the roads, you know, I would be looking really hard at just doing an annual levy on a millage under 247-670 for a multitude of different reasons. One of which is, you know, right now you have a per parcel charge, but that doesn't necessarily account for, say, drivers of traffic, like big box stores for one, right? They have a tremendous amount of traffic that comes and goes from there, and yet they're still paying $85, right? Because it's on a per parcel charge. So
Yeah.
you might find that if you went to a millage-based system, that the average homeowner might end up paying less because you're able to generate more revenue from other large valued properties.
Pros and cons.
Yeah, Lowe's and Menards and.
Yep.
Yeah, and they bring in a lot of traffic. See, that's the other thing with the special assessment that I'm like, well, you know, my neighborhood's not getting a
But the other thing
specific
is-
benefit.
The money we're using is on the local roads, not the primary roads. That's, if I'm Meyer, I
Well,
can
they still
argue.
drive through,
Well, Meyer doesn't.
Yeah, but you know, the
Right.
nice part about that, not subject to appeal.
Okay,
yeah, yep.
all right.
Pros and cons.
I don't know, they all drive through
It
my
also
neighborhood.
feels
you
more
know?
democratic that way. You go to millage instead of-
Well, but this wouldn't be, what he said, Mike, what you're suggesting is not the voter, but
The levy,
the levy.
Yeah,
The
annual levy.
yeah,
Annual levy.
annual.
yep.
Sorry, I'm new here. Where does the millage, where would the millage need to land in order to fund our roads? What we're talking about here?
You mean amount?
Yes.
Well, I was told, and I don't know if this is right or not, but I was told yesterday that 1 mil would raise almost $1 million annually.
More than that, like 1.4.
Where's,
So we want to raise 1.1 million, it's about 0.85 mils. We want to raise, you know.
Yeah,
Sorry, still playing catch up. What's the
Where's that
target
table?
number?
Where's that table?
depends on the year, and that's
oh, right
the
here,
joy of the annual
Here,
levy.
could you
is
pass that?
Determine what you want to spend.
I want that
pick
back
the
though.
appropriate village amount.
Mr. Monier?
I
Wait,
don't think so.
With
Well,
your
the
question,
The question I think you asked was, where does the money need to land? Listening to the statute being read, it said the funds need to go to the county road fund, which would be the county road commission, or would that be the township road?
County Road Commission.
so we would collect the mill or the per year and then give that to the road commission?
Yeah, pursuant to an agreement, though. That's why it's that agreement then that would specify those projects. So I envision that on an annual basis, you could do a form agreement and on an annual basis, change out the project list for that particular year and say, this year we're funding these. That's how it would work.
Which we're kind of doing now, right?
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's how
It's here, isn't it?
most all the townships do it anyways. I mean, when the townships do all the local roads, you know, subdivisions, they just say, they tell town road commission, give us a list for all their roads, you know what I'm saying? They don't do obviously all the roads in 1 year, but they'll look like 3 roads in this subdivision, 2 roads in that subdivision, 1 road in this sub, so they just turn it all over and the road commission manages all the projects.
So that could be, now this, we talked about at our meeting with Jess that possibly if we, you know, if we did all the roads, we could get rid of these neighborhood road SADs because they're a pain. Unless they wanted, if they had gravel and they wanted to go to, to an upgrade. But if we had this 1 mil per year and they wanted to go to an upgrade, would that still be a possibility? Under the,
Will they do their own neighborhood SAD?
still, even under this
Right.
levy,
Well, are we talking public roads or private roads?
public?
You, under that levy, you can improve any public road you want,
Basically,
but it's up to you.
the township can make the decision.
Okay,
Correct.
okay, so it seems like this gives us a little bit more options. I'm not comfortable with not having a vote of the people, from the people, but then when we do, if we did go that route, then we would, it's different. Okay, I think there's a lot that we could talk about with the 3 funding options, but the objective, go
I
ahead.
can answer Jeff's question. Taxable value for South Township is $1.5 billion. So 1 mil would raise $1.5 million. So that's why 1.2, 0.85 would be closer to 1.1, 1.2.
Gotcha.
Thank you. According to that table right there. That's what I'm basing it on.
Okay, any more questions for? No? Mike, yeah, thank you so much.
You've given
You're
us a
very
lot to
welcome.
think about.
Oh, all right.
Thank you.
Or age.
Open.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
The local road.
Uh,
Oh, wow,
Where are we?
232.
I didn't
32
look at the whole
of the-
packet, sorry.
Oh, okay.
What section is it in?
So what townships do you know do the 1 mil levy? Or whatever mill or whatever levy
That.
they do?
Gotcha.
There's a few townships that voted on millages. There's a few townships that are charter townships that take it out of their general fund. I guess I'm not aware of any one in Washington County that levies the annual thing like Mike was stressing there. So I'm not aware of anyone doing that. I actually, I've done this a long time. I've never heard of it. It makes, on one hand, it makes a lot of sense. Actually, what it goes back to is Act 180, 1909 Act, Public Act 283, how roads were originally funded. How roads were originally funded is every year the road commission would go to the county board of supervisors before it was voted board of county commissioners. And they'd give a list of projects and say, you know, obviously 1909, we want to do $100,000 worth of projects, whatever the number was. They figure out what the taxable value, they put that on the taxes, they levy it against the people, they do those projects. So I'm guessing Act 51, the road funding, you know, 1951, they sort of use that same model. So you come up with, you know, we want to do 10 gravel roads and 10 3 paved roads, whatever. Have the road commission give you a number, that's going to be $1 million. What's going to be, for us to raise $1 million, we have to levy 0.7 mils, 0.6 mils, whatever that number is. So each year, that's how you do it. Or you can do it, or just say, each year we want to raise, you know, point whatever, so much money and go to those projects. So yeah. So I'm not aware, most either, like I said, either townships have their own levy that's voted on, or a lot of the bigger townships like Superior, Pittsfield are charter townships. So they levy a higher, so they just take it out of their general fund.
Right, because they have,
They can levy up to 5 mils, and I think we can only levy up to.
yeah, 3 with through the Public Act 51. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just had 2 comments and tying into that. So we're in kind of a crucial time period right now because the Scio Township budget must be adopted by April 1st. And we're trying to get this next 2023 fiscal year road projects in front of that budget based on the fact that if we can get the township to commit to a certain amount of money, there is a matching fund that the Washtenaw County Road Commission will give us. But we must have Scio Township commit to it by by May 19, or it's gone. So there is $99,940 that the Road Commission has said they will match if Scio Township puts forth money. So we're trying to, you know, as a base, make sure we get that in front of the board before March 14 or March 28, whatever the final date is. We've got to get that figured out.
March
tonight.
31st is the when we have to have it.
I think we've had a really robust discussion about millages, levies, and SADs this evening that I think is going to lead into a lot more discussion. A question I'd like to get answered, but I'm not sure who would answer it, is if we were to go with a levy, does that tie into the budget cycle with the fiscal year? Or when does a levy request, the board does it by resolution, when does that have to occur? Because we're going to come into this every year where the road commission is going to give us a project list. There's going to be a deadline for the matching funds, and there's going to be an April 1 budget that must be adopted.
Right, they kind of overlap a little bit as far as, well, the timing. So there's that crunch period. But if we had it, well, and really, the township has been behind with their budgets for a few years. I don't know how far back. So David Rowley, when he was here, requested, or he suggested that we start our budgets in November and December. And I think that if we had got onto that schedule, and even with our road committee begin then. And if, no matter what our funding source is, we still have to have a plan. We have to give them a budget.
We don't get this report from the Washtenaw County Road Commission, the 2023 report, just came in the last 2 weeks. So
Right.
Typically, it shows up in February.
Isn't it around the same amount every year, around 100,000?
It's gone up. I mean, it's in one of these things has gone up quite a bit. Used to be quite a bit less than that now, yeah. Last couple of years, it's been about 100,000.
Could we kind of,
Take a target that's gonna be 100,000 next year, yeah, I would say yes.
You could target that, but I think the bigger question, like what you're getting at, Linda, is what tax bill does it go on so we know that we can fund for the future? I mean, we can sit down and say, all right, in hypothetically 2025, we're gonna need $850,000. What's the timing to get it on? I mean, we have two tax bills if it's a rotating levy or not. We need to know the timing so that we can get the right millage amount into whichever tax bill the township wants to collect the money on.
It's always winter. Those taxes are always winter. Look at your bills.
No, and if that's the answer, great.
That's the answer.
Yes,
in Dexter billing is different than Ann Arbor. So
again, we
Yeah.
just need someone to tell us so that we can figure out our back timeline as to when we need to provide a number, even if we have to get something before the county can officially give us their estimate, because the money's got to be there.
That's kind of the conundrum. It's the
Yes.
chicken and the egg thing. But for tonight, I can't impress strongly enough the
Well,
fact that if
We did at one of the previous meetings have a resolution to say put 700 and some odd $1,000 to the board.
yeah, and
That would ensure we're covered if we've overstated based on Washtenaw County. You don't have to spend it all.
well, this already went for the
Right.
budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that's in, then we should be covered for the next.
anything else that we need to do.
And there's still some questions that went to Mike
Yeah.
that the answers were not shared. So,
The short term is, are we set for the budget to make sure that every T is crossed and I is dotted so that the matching funds are covered and everything else?
well, Roy, we sent your,
Right, because we passed a resolution with that list and I thought I'm guessing that got sent to the board.
it went to Mike, or not Mike, Mark Thompson, yes. It went to him and he has it, so.
We should be good.
Okay.
So simply, yeah, we've done our
No,
first
it's-
steps.
Make sure all the steps happen.
We're basing that on the previous timelines, and we thought we had to get something in for the March, get on the March budget, so that whenever your budget meeting is next meeting or whatever that is, you should have at least the number that came from this
Yeah.
committee, which is gonna be close to the number that the road commission, and I guess obviously the question, I mean, some of the things still haven't been, I'm not sure if they're answered or not, something that might be some lead question.
Yeah.
Can we spend money on engineering for Park Road or not? That seems to be one of the questions out there. This is mystery. And then the other mystery seems like, can we spend money a second time on Uplands and Sow Ridge project? Because some people were saying we can't, even though we've done most all the other roads twice. For some reason, there's some resistance to spending money on Uplands the second time. So those are the legal questions I think are in Mike's. And maybe Mike responded to those for some reason he can't.
Well, he can't share those with
Not
us,
yet.
but going back to Bob's point, if we have requested the funds, I just want to make sure that the board doesn't get bogged down in, we can't allocate funds because we don't have the answers to all of these questions. The party line I'd like to try and push is, wish you would allocate those funds.
Oh my gosh, that's me. I'm sorry. I was like, Ian, turn your timer
Come
on.
Please allocate these funds if they are not spent because it's decided that they cannot be spent in this way. They just don't, they go back into the budget. They're unspent funds, but if we don't allocate them, then we will not be able to get these.
What I always tell townships, always let's get this first list of projects to the road commission so they can use up the matching dollars. Some townships, there'd be like 3 or 4 agreements, you know, they do the first set of projects, And then they'd say, oh, we found some more money, we'd like to do another 3 or 4 projects. And then sometimes they found some more money, they do another 3 or 4 projects. So, you know, at least get the money, the matching money spent down. I think some years the township didn't even use the matching dollars, they just gave it back to the township. So my encouragement is use those matching dollars.
Now, when do they give us the matching dollars? Right away? Like,
Yeah, because basically the agreement that Adam sent over, it totals everything up. I forget the number, it's in here. And then they subtract out the 99,940 from it, and then South Township's share is blank. So then they'll bill the township based on our share.
okay,
We won't see the money, they just don't, it's a credit to our account, basically, the 99,900.
okay, I'm just thinking, why didn't we use the grant in the past? But I mean, that one time, I don't, let's not get into that.
We
It's
didn't
just,
have a roads committee in 18.
oh, okay, that's when, all right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I thought, I don't know. All right. So the next meeting, we talk, Adam's, what came through with Adam, and then we can continue with figuring out the 3 funding options. I mean, that it's going to be probably another, and then we have to write up a resolution, right? Or a recommendation to give to the board.
Yes.
It seems like, yeah, next meeting, I mean, one option would be do further exploration, because I mean, some of the stuff that he shared tonight, it's like, I mean, we were meeting on this, but sort of like he opened some eyes to me, it's like, oh, maybe I think we should go back, pursue this a little bit more and find out, like Linda was saying, sometimes, how would that work? Because Scio's budget is different than the road commission's budget, with is different than, you know, figure out how, if we were to levy it and it goes on the winter taxes, how would we know, you know, how much you want to levy? Because we wouldn't have the list of, you know, how could we make that work? Obviously it can work, you just got to figure out how.
Well, and we may have a gap in between, you know, the projects that we do or have finish up to that point. I mean, I think the roads for the most part, other than some thinking Park Ridge in my neighborhood, but they can wait. It's not like we're stopping and saying, no, we're not doing roads anymore. So there could be a little gap. And also, yeah, okay. And Linda, you said you had something else to.
Well, this is February, and in March, if you remember, March and April last year, we had a flood of emails and correspondence from people with road problems. And it will happen again, I'm almost certain. And we've also had a number of neighborhoods that have approached us. I'm thinking about off of Miller Road, is it Cedar? What is it? Oh, I just lost the name. Green Knolls.
Green Knolls.
Thank you. Most recently again, and they have corresponded with us earlier in 2022. I really feel like we need to somehow address it. Are we going to recommend that the township work with some SADs in 2023 and help some of these neighborhoods move that direction? Or are we going to try and find a pivot? We need to offer them some direction.
Well, I did respond to Jan Black, and, you know, I've been in through those neighborhoods, and they're not like.
It's not catastrophic.
No,
but it's not good either. So I just, what I don't want to do is have people correspond with us and do nothing, you know, not have any answer for them at all for a year.
Yes, well, I've been saying, telling them that we are going through a process here, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, because if we're gonna have a township wide, then we're gonna have a special assessment for a neighborhood that's gonna end up paying into another levy or a millage or whatever that would be covered under those funds. So this is where we've got to figure out what we want to do. Do we just want to do the same thing that we've been doing? Or do we want to do all the roads or do none of the roads? I mean, that's already off the table, so.
I'm merely asking you to address that.
That's a no. Can potentially get clever. What we're putting forward is SAD money. The county match isn't SAD money, but technically. We could probably spend that as we see fit.
I'm sorry,
The county, rough number, the county is giving us $100,000 in matching to cover things. Most of the things we're doing are on our list, so it's coming out of the township-wide SAD. We are restricted in how we can spend that money. $100,000 isn't restricted. We're getting that from the county. We can spend that as we see fit theoretically. So if we need to add areas that aren't covered to cover a crisis, hypothetically, isn't that a source of funding?
What Bob's saying, it doesn't have the same restrictions. We put our own
Right.
restrictions on our township-wide SAD by this list.
Right.
The money that the road commission, the only thing the restriction is, it's gotta be spent on road in South Township. I guess we could
Right.
probably spend it in the township.
It's not something we'll resolve this evening. What I'm actually asking is, let's make sure we have something on the agenda that addresses the neighborhoods who have come forward and are going to be looking for 2023 answers.
And Jillian, maybe, I mean, there's a couple things here. One is, are we gonna stick with just the collector roads, or are we gonna do all the roads? And maybe that's the first discussion we have next meeting, because I mean, because I think people are gonna continue to come in. And if we're thinking about doing all the roads, like Park Ridge, you know, I'd hate to have them, oh, we got our SID all ready to go. And then we tell them, oh, guess what, we're gonna do all the roads. So it seems like the sooner we can sort of at least get our head around that, you know, or we elect not to do all the roads, that's fine, then they can do their neighborhood SID. And then, because then we'll figure out, is the number gonna be $500,000, $1 million, whatever the number is gonna be. And then you get back and say, okay, how are we gonna fund $500,000 or $1 million? There's like, you know, 3 or 4 options. You can do it annually, you can do this, you know, so like, then the second part is, how do we get to that number? But first is, you know, as a committee, is there support to do something bigger or just stay with the same? And we could, in the subcommittee, we could come up with some of the pros and cons of doing it and have, you know, a healthy discussion of like, let's think about where do we think we want to go on the next, you know, road funding.
The real problem is ultimately it's a board
Right.
decision and
I know.
the board's hitting the public up.
Well, we don't have a project manager.
Yeah.
And we don't
Beyond,
really,
beyond that, but we know the fire safety, whatever is coming up. The Boston Village is gonna be redone. I mean, it's.
yeah,
The more, keeping it the same or doing more. Find ways to get the money. It's just what's the board really wanting to do.
And the people, what the people want. I really have had a hard time with all of these committees, including what went on with the fire department discussion is, and even you, Jillian, cutting the people out. You don't cut the people out. People are what make Scio Township up.
so with, oh, Paula, we'll have public comments. We need to go to review the minutes first.
Yeah.
Okay. Or let's go to the minutes. Is that okay? Are we
Yeah.
for right now?
thank you.
Okay, let's, Bob, in the minutes, there's a typo for Kathleen Brand's name, last name, okay. Other than that, when I went through, I didn't see anything. I mean, you take pretty complete minutes. Anybody else? So can we, is there a motion to approve the minutes? And, oh, wait, he wasn't looking up. So did you get that? It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, you, and second,
I'll second you.
okay.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. There's reports, and we had our board meeting last night. As I said, I did not do the report for last night, but I will have it included for the next meeting. And then I will have probably, there'll be 4 reports, hopefully only 4 board meetings for the next report. DDA, when do you meet?
I believe we meet in 2 weeks.
Okay, and let's see, Jeff,
Yeah, well, so the planning commission didn't meet 2 weeks ago. We didn't have an agenda. We just met this week as well. And sorry, I sent the email, but I don't remember what we talked about. Okay, so we had two things come up. Well, one was a conditional rezoning. Hope I'm not misspeaking there. We recommended to the Board of Trustees to approve a conditional rezoning allowing for a restaurant to be opened in a recreational like golf facility or something like that, sports recreation facility off of Jackson Plaza. So that was a recommendation. Sorry if I'm misspeaking. I don't recall if it was a conditional rezoning or not, but and then the other one was further discussion on the what's the old movie theater on Jackson.
that wasn't quality, was it?
Yeah,
Quality, it was,
16,
okay.
yeah. So we're working with them on amending a PUD. So this is the second time, I guess probably the third time, second time since I've been on the planning commission that we've spoken to, I think, the owner about amending the PUD because he says that keeping it a movie theater is not tenable.
You know, we missed we missed the bowling and the movie, theater, but times have changed.
It's on car dealers, yeah.
Yeah.
What it is, it's sort of like, yeah, roads, it's the cars, yeah.
Right,
Think about
yeah, isn't it
entertainment.
ironic?
Just
that
drive your car, that's entertainment.
We're trying to promote people walking and we have all these dealerships, it's like, and what was the other committee?
Yeah, Park with us.
I'm sorry, yes,
We
right.
had our first meeting as a new committee and really didn't, we just introduced ourselves and we elected committee chairs. We do a meeting next Wednesday, where we get more into projects and stuff like
You meet the first Wednesday of the
that.
month?
Second,
Wednesday of the month,
4 to 5:30.
second Wednesday of the month, okay, 4 to 5:30, okay. All right, and then I'm including every agenda packet. I will be including educational information, please. If you have anything, forward it to me and we'll upload it. This isn't just for our education, but it's for the public as well. There's always something, maps are always fun. It sounded really wordy, didn't it? Maps are so fun.
Well, I think it's appropriate for the committee.
Yeah. Okay, so public comments?
Let me jump on.
Okay. Paula?
Sorry for the
You're the only
outburst.
one of.
I listened to the board meeting last night too, and this is the same issue with the fire. And Mr. Supervisor Hathaway was talking, cherry-picked Homier to look at how he's using a different client, yet then they had our new interim, Mr. Townsend was using Fink. And what I look at is he's saying, look at the objective. I go, look at the ethics. And yes, you want to accomplish something. And also, I want to bring up something that was, the assessor gave her a little thing the other night, last night. And she discussed, the taxable value and all that. Well, if you look at all the accidents in Washtenaw County Road Commission knew all about it with their 3-year study down Zeeb. And I think that's in the packet here, where the most accidents are in Washtenaw County. And Jackson and Zeeb is one of them. And that was probably before that light. And what I was told, they had a 3-year study, and you probably know the gentleman, Brent somebody. And so all these people were injured. We had all this sad money sitting around, but we couldn't put up a light when they had 3 accidents a week, major ones, people spending time in nursing homes, ICUs, all kinds of therapy, people being killed. So I go, okay, so the big thing is Park Road. This is Hathaway's big, and Kathy said it you can go back and listen to all of these different, almost 2 years of meetings on videos. and look at all the packet agendas. And like I said last night, October 5th, Mr. Homier has a thing here. Kathy asked about engineering, because I think on the February 14th bot meeting, they went ahead 4-3. You were not part of that vote. To go ahead with some engineering money, SAD money, I think from our project. It was either, remember I said, well, was it 125 and then it was 150 for using engineering study? And in here, he answers Kathy, and I suggest you go back and look because it's on the October 5th of 22. It goes into saying here that in your regards to the first question is about using money for a SAD that has not occurred for the engineering. It's just I see no way in which to collect the cost of engineering study from a SAD that was never formed, or two, on a SAD that was formed but never resulted in a public improvement. In other words, there is no mechanism by which you can recoup the cost of engineering study and building. And then it goes on to some other pertinent stuff. If you go back and read all these different opinions and look at Joe Turner's, I go, why are we gonna go SAD route again? When we had Murty's brother in here complaining about $85. To me, in the presentation, it said, oh, a person, it's so easy to understand just an amount. I think most adults can understand what a portion of a mill is. And it makes sense to me for people with higher taxable value in their homes and in their businesses to pay more for the roads, which means all these businesses that are coming down Z, car washes, whatever is going to be built, it's going to be newer, it's going to have a higher taxable value, that they all pay their fair share of what they're creating. And to me, whether it's levied that way and to get to your objective, that's the way to go. Not these like, let's make different SAD districts as we go along to come into that. I think that was number 2 of Homier's. But I don't take him as the gospel or the Book of Mormon. He has one opinion, and that doesn't necessarily mean the Tracts Tribunal or that somebody isn't going to go ahead and say, I disagree with this and challenge the township. And that's my opinion.
Okay, just want to clarify something. So the other, when we had the vote, it had to do with the MEDC grant. And yes, it was a 4-3 vote. The engineering for Park Road project, potential Park Road project, will be paid for out of that MEDC grant.
Right.
Yes.
They
Okay.
decided that wasn't, engineering was clear.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. Ian, what is that? Timer. Oh, that's a really cool new timer. I was gonna blame it on Bob, with his playing on his phone.
You're the one who's been making noises tonight.
No.
Your phone in your bag. David Lee has his hand up.
David? Can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. Couple of things. The funding method presentation had a couple of things that I think we need corrected. On page 7, it says the township is responsible for all necessary work on pavements, culverts, and bridges for county local roads. And the township is responsible for all necessary work on pavements, culverts, and bridges on subdivision roads. And Mr. Homier's opening comments tonight was the townships are not responsible for spending a dime on road maintenance. So I think your presentation needs to be corrected. The township is not responsible for anything with respect to roads, culverts, et cetera, and bridges, especially bridges. Second thing, it was asked if 188 was illegal, because I've mentioned that we did some things illegally, and 188, the SAD under 188 was not illegal. What the board did, what the township did illegally, was we added projects. And the justification for adding these projects was Lou Kidder said, well, these roads used to be connector roads, but because Jackson Road cut it off or 14 cut the road off, these roads have been abandoned. I think it's Craig Road. For some reason, the Road Commission abandoned a mid part of Craig Road. That used to be a connector road between Wagner and Miller. So he said, let's work on those roads too. So those were added after the roll was set, after the project list was accepted. So if you expect the 188 is a law or is a rule, we broke the rule. That's what I mean about illegal. We also gave money to subdivisions to incentivize them to do their paving. For all intents and purposes, we added more projects to the list. Again, illegal. And then the last thing, Mr. Homier mentioned something about whether or not the SAD confers a benefit to your property. And he said, it's difficult to overcome the validity of that. Now, Act 188 specifically says that it has to confer a special benefit. In fact, in one of the terms, it uses S special, S special. Now, I don't know if that means it's more special than special, but it constantly says special benefit. Now, I think what Mr. Homier was referring to when he says, well, how do you get to your road? How do you get to your private road? You have to drive on the public road. That to me is a perceived benefit. And that's not what 188 says. 188 says special benefit. And in fact, the Michigan Supreme Court in Johnson versus City of Inkster overturned their or declared their SAD illegal because they had assessed properties that didn't front on the major road. I forget what it was, 8 Mile. I don't know what road it was. But because those properties didn't front on the road, they did not get a special benefit. So Michigan Supreme Court overturned that SAD. So I think if we want to do something that benefits the entire township, my opinion, it has to be a millage. And I kind of like the idea that Mr. Homier came up with was a 1-year millage. You come to the township with a list of roads that we're going to do. These 5 roads, we need $1.6 million. So we'll need, what is it, 0.9, 1.2, whatever the millage is. I like that 1-year millage. That sounds really enticing to me. One more thing, Mr. Homier said, he said, if the township didn't spend a dime on roads, would your property values go up? Well, I bought my property in 1993. Every year, my property value went up and the township didn't spend a dime on roads. Now, we started spending money on roads in 2023 and my property value continued to go up, but at the same rate it did prior to us spending money. So whether or not we spend money on roads, I don't think it really affects, at least in Scio Township. I don't know that it affects property values. And in fact, I actually asked our current assessor if she would reassess properties if their road was paved or unpaved. Would the values go up? And she said, absolutely not. I don't look at the road surface when I assess properties. She said, in fact, I like gravel roads. So I don't know, I don't know if her opinion is what sets the rule, but she is the assessor. And that's what she told me. So one more thing regarding an SAD versus a millage. I think Mr. Homier was saying that your SAD, your millage would tend to go down because of Headley. Actually, I think millage actually tends to go up because splits. We had one property on, I think it's Liberty or Scio Church, split from one parcel to 35 parcels. But because we didn't impose the road SAD on those 35 parcels, we lost out on 6 years worth of road SAD on those 35 parcels. Had it been a millage, that would have happened. Also, I mean, look at Trailwoods, look at Scio View, look at the development that's going in on Baker Road. All of those will increase the value of Scio Township. Mark Perry has put together a spreadsheet that shows township value just based on inflation and growth going up to 1.8, I think like 1.82 or $2 billion by I think 2016 or 2017. So I think the millage is the way to go. An SAD, I think, especially a 188 is absolutely the wrong way to go.
David,
So
I'm sorry.
I really like that 1-year millage. I'm done.
David, I'm sorry. Yeah, your time is up. Thank you. Thank you for your insights.
I don't see any other hands raised at the moment.
Okay. We are to adjournment to,
So move.
Second.
I'll say.
Aye.
Aye. Well, that's not the right time.
9:03.
9:03, is that what you have?
It's 8:56.
8:56.
Oh, 8:56,
Can you stop recording?
Yes,
yes.
we are adjourned.
This is 8:56.
Is it? Okay, from the
Yours
side,
is-
it looks
yeah.
like it's 8:50.